They say money changes everything, but it can't change the past, and it certainly can't stop the rain. Harrison Sterling had a net worth of $40 million, a penthouse overlooking the city, and a heart as cold as the engine of his Rolls-Royce. But on a freezing Tuesday night, one glimpse of a tattered coat on a street corner shattered his perfect world. He thought he was looking at strangers. He was actually looking at the wife he threw out, and the daughter he never claimed. What happened next wasn't just a reunion. It was a reckoning that would expose a 5-year-old lie and threaten to destroy everyone involved. You think you know heartbreak? You haven't heard the story of the Sterling Empire yet. The rain in Chicago doesn't just fall. It assaults you. It was a Tuesday in late November, the kind of evening where the wind cuts through the skyscrapers of the Loop like a serrated knife, searching for exposed skin. Harrison Sterling sat in the back of his silver Rolls-Royce Phantom, the interior a sanctuary of hand-stitched leather and silence. At 38, Harrison was the youngest CEO in the history of Sterling Vance Logistics. He was a man who measured his life in quarterly gains and hostile takeovers. His face, sharp-jawed and usually composed, was illuminated by the soft blue light of his tablet. He was reading a dossier on a competitor, looking for a weakness, a loose thread he could pull to unravel their entire operation. "Traffic is deadlocked, Mr. Sterling," his driver, Arthur, said. Arthur was a man of few words, a former Marine who had been with the family for a decade. Accident up near the Magnificent Mile. "Take the side streets, Arthur," Harrison murmured, not looking up. "I need to be at the gala by 7. Preston is announcing the merger tonight." "Yes, sir." The heavy car turned smoothly, the suspension swallowing the imperfections of the road. They moved away from the glittering storefronts of Michigan Avenue and into the darker, grittier veins of the city. Here the streetlights flickered, casting long, dancing shadows against the brick warehouses that were slowly being converted into overpriced lofts. Harrison finally looked up, rubbing his temples. A headache had been gnawing at him all day, a remnant of the stress from the pending investigation into his company's offshore accounts. It was nothing he couldn't handle, but it was a nuisance. As the car idled at a red light on a desolate corner, Harrison looked out the rain-streaked window. The world outside was a blur of grey and charcoal. Then he saw it, or rather, he saw them. Huddled under the meagre overhang of a shuttered bakery was a woman. She was wearing a coat that looked 2 sizes too big, the wool matted and dark with moisture. She was shielding something, someone, with her body. A small child, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, pressed against her legs, trying to disappear into the fabric of the woman's coat. Harrison's eyes swept over them with the indifference of the wealthy. Just another tragic tableau in a big city. But then the woman turned her head to check for a bus. The streetlight caught her profile, the sharp angle of her nose, the way her wet hair plastered against a cheekbone he had once traced with his thumb 1,000 times. Harrison's heart hammered against his ribs, a violent, physical blow that made him gasp. Jamie. It was impossible. Jamie was supposed to be in Paris, or maybe London. When he had kicked her out 5 years ago, he had given her a settlement check for $2 million. She was supposed to be living the high life, laughing at him with whatever tennis pro she was sleeping with now, but the woman on the corner wasn't living the high life. She was shivering. She looked gaunt, her eyes hollowed out by exhaustion. And the child. Harrison squinted. The little girl had wild, curly hair that defied the rain. It was the same shade of auburn as his mother's. "Stop the car," Harrison whispered. Arthur didn't hear him over the hum of the heater. "Sir, I said stop the car," Harrison roared, his voice cracking. Arthur slammed on the brakes. The Rolls-Royce lurched to a halt in the middle of the empty intersection. "Mr. Sterling, it's not safe here." Harrison ignored him. He threw the door open. The freezing rain hit him instantly, soaking his bespoke suit within seconds. The wind howled, carrying the scent of ozone and exhaust. He ran. He didn't run like a CEO. He ran like a desperate man. The woman under the awning flinched as he approached, pulling the child tighter. She looked up, terror in her eyes, expecting a mugger or a drunk. When their eyes locked, the terror didn't leave. It changed. It morphed into shame. And then, a hardening, cold anger. "Harrison," she breathed. Her voice was raspy, broken. Harrison stood 5 feet away, the rain dripping from his nose. He looked at her tattered shoes. He looked at the little girl, who was peeking out with wide, terrified blue eyes. His eyes. "Jamie," he choked out. What is this? Where is the money? Where is the car?" Jamie let out a bitter, dry laugh that sounded like dry leaves being crushed. "The money?" She looked down at her daughter. "Go back to your penthouse, Harrison. We don't have anything you want to steal." "Steal? I gave you $2 million, Harrison shouted over the wind. "I gave you everything to leave quietly." "I never got a dime," Jamie spat back, the venom in her voice stunning him. "Your lawyer made sure of that. He said if I took a cent, he'd frame me for the embezzlement you were accused of." Harrison froze. "What?" "And he said..." Jamie's voice trembled, her hand stroking the little girl's wet hair. "He said if I ever told you about Lily, he'd make sure she ended up in the system." Harrison looked at the child. "Lily. Is she..." Harrison couldn't finish the sentence. Jamie looked him dead in the eye, the rain mingling with the tears on her face. "She's yours, Harrison. She's the daughter you were too busy suspecting to love." The silence between them was louder than the Chicago storm. Harrison stared at the child. Lily. She was shivering violently now, her lips turning a pale, frightening shade of blue. Reality crashed into Harrison's ego. He could argue about the past later. Right now, his ex-wife and a child who might be his daughter were freezing to death on a street corner. "Get in the car," Harrison commanded, his voice returning to its boardroom authority. Jamie recoiled, stepping back against the wet brick wall. "No, we're waiting for the bus. It comes in 10 minutes. "Look at her, Jamie." Harrison pointed a shaking hand at Lily. "She's freezing." "I don't care what you think of me. Put the girl in the car." Jamie hesitated. She looked down at Lily, who was whimpering softly, clutching a soggy, stuffed rabbit. The maternal instinct overrode the pride. Jamie nodded once, stiffly. Harrison rushed forward to help, but Jamie batted his hand away. "Don't touch her." She scooped Lily up and walked toward the idling Rolls-Royce. Arthur, ever the professional, had already stepped out with an umbrella, though he looked bewildered to see his boss ushering a homeless-looking woman into the pristine back seat. "To the penthouse, Arthur," Harrison said as he slid in opposite them. "Cancel the gala. Tell Preston I'm sick." "Sir, Mr. Preston." "Do it!" The car merged back into traffic. The warmth of the interior was immediate, but the atmosphere was glacial. Jamie sat on the edge of the leather seat, careful not to let her dirty coat touch more than necessary. She held Lily on her lap, rubbing the girl's arms vigorously. Harrison pulled a cashmere blanket from the compartment next to him, usually reserved for high-end clients, and extended it. "Here, wrap her in this." Jamie took it without a word, swaddling Lily. Harrison watched them, his mind racing at 100 miles an hour. 5 years ago, his marriage had dissolved in a week. He had found emails between Jamie and a man named J.D., emails detailing plans to siphon money from his private accounts and run away to the Cayman Islands. His lawyer, Preston Calloway, his oldest friend, the man he trusted with his life, had brought him the evidence. Preston had handled the divorce. Preston had told him Jamie confessed, took the payout, and vanished. "I never got a dime," she had said. Harrison looked at Jamie. She was thinner than he remembered. Her hands were rough, the nails short and unpolished. This wasn't a woman pretending to be poor. This was poverty etched into the skin. "You said Preston handled the divorce," Harrison said, breaking the silence. His voice was low, controlled. Jamie didn't look at him. She stared out the window. Preston came to the apartment that night, after you kicked me out. He had documents. He said you found the offshore accounts. He said you were going to press charges for fraud unless I signed away my rights to the settlement and left the state immediately. I never accused you of fraud, Harrison said, frowning. I accused you of adultery, of planning to leave me. Jamie whipped her head around, her eyes blazing. Adultery? I was pregnant, Harrison. I was sick every morning. That's why I wasn't going to your stupid galas. I wasn't seeing anyone. I saw the emails, Jamie, to J.D. J.D. is Dr. Janine Davis, Jamie snapped. My OB-GYN. I was emailing her about the complications with the baby. I wanted to surprise you once we knew the pregnancy was viable. Harrison felt the blood drain from his face. Dr. Davis? Check your records, Harrison. You're the data genius, she mocked bitterly. Harrison pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking so badly he could hardly type. He accessed his encrypted cloud archives. He kept everything. He searched for the old evidence files Preston had sent him. File corrupted. He tried to access the backups of his own home server from 5 years ago. Data wipe, authorized by Admin P. Calloway. A cold knot of dread formed in his stomach. He told me, Jamie continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, that if I'd told you about the baby, you'd think I got pregnant to trap you for the money. He said you'd use your lawyers to take the baby away and never let me see her. He showed me a paternity suit you had already drafted. I never drafted a paternity suit, Harrison whispered. Well, it had your signature, Jamie said, turning back to the window. And it looked real enough to a scared 24-year-old with no family and $10 in her pocket. Harrison looked at Lily. The girl had stopped shivering and was blinking sleepily at him. She had his chin, the undeniable cleft in the chin that had been in the Sterling line for generations. He had missed 5 years. First steps, first words, the first day of school. He had been sitting in his ivory tower, making millions, while his wife and child were... Where? Where have you been living? Harrison asked. Shelters, a motel on 89th when I get cleaning shifts, Jamie said flatly. We manage. Why didn't you reach out? My parents... Your parents think I'm a whore who stole $1 million, Harrison. Preston made sure the press ran that story, didn't he? Gold digger wife flees with cash. Who would believe me? The car began to slow down as it approached the Sterling Tower. The doorman rushed to open the door, but Harrison waved him off. He turned to Jamie. I don't expect you to believe me. I don't expect you to forgive me. But tonight, you are staying here, in the guest wing. I will call a doctor for Lily. And then... Harrison's eyes darkened, a dangerous gleam appearing that usually signaled the end of a competitor's career. And then, I'm going to make a phone call. The penthouse was exactly as Jamie remembered it, cold, expansive, and devoid of life. It looked like a museum, not a home. The marble floors echoed as they walked in. Lily's eyes went wide. Is this a castle, Mummy? Jamie squeezed her hand. Just a house, baby. Just for tonight. Harrison moved with a frantic energy now. He ordered the housekeeper, Mrs. Higgins, who looked as if she'd seen a ghost when she saw Jamie, to prepare the guest suite and bring warm soup. He called his private concierge to have a pediatrician come to the apartment immediately. Once Lily was checked over, mild hypothermia and malnutrition, the doctor said, prescribing rest and warmth, and tucked into a bed that cost more than Jamie had earned in 5 years, Jamie came out to the living room. Harrison was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city lights. He held a tumbler of scotch, but he hadn't taken a sip. She's asleep, Jamie said, wrapping her arms around herself. She was wearing one of Harrison's thick robes. Her clothes were in the dryer. I'm sorry, Harrison said, without turning around. It was a simple phrase, but it carried the weight of 5 years of silence. Sorry doesn't fix it, Harrison, Jamie said, sinking onto the white sofa. We're leaving in the morning. No, Harrison turned. You're not. You can't keep us here. I don't want to keep you prisoner, Jamie. I want to keep you safe. Harrison walked over to the coffee table and tossed a file folder onto it. Jamie looked at it. It was a current personnel file for Preston Calloway. "I just got off the phone with my internal audit team," Harrison said. "I triggered a forensic sweep of the company accounts, the deep ones, the ones only Preston and I have access to. And 5 years ago, $2 million was withdrawn from my personal holding company. It was labeled matrimonial settlement. But it never went to you. It went to a shell company in the Cayman Islands called Bluebird LLC. Jamie frowned. "So he stole it." "It gets worse," Harrison said, sitting down opposite her. "Bluebird LLC owns a controlling stake in a rival logistics firm, one that has been underbidding us for years. Preston didn't just steal the money. He used it to fund my competition. And he needed me distracted. He needed me broken." Harrison looked at Jamie, his eyes pleading. "He knew if we stayed together, you'd eventually see the books. You were the only one who ever double-checked my math, Jamie. Remember when you used to come to the office?" Jamie gave a faint, sad smile. "You were always terrible at the minor details." "He had to get rid of you," Harrison realized, the horror of it sinking in, "and he used my own ego to do it. He knew I was insecure about whether you really loved me or the money." Jamie looked down at her hands. "I loved you, Harrison. I loved you so much it hurt." Harrison reached out, his hand hovering over hers. "I'm going to destroy him, Jamie. I'm going to take everything he has, but I need you to trust me one last time, just for 24 hours. Suddenly the elevator chimed. Jamie jumped. "Who is that?" she whispered. "No one comes up here without keycard access." Harrison stood up, his face hardening. "Only 2 people have that card, me and the company attorney." The elevator doors slid open. Preston Calloway stepped out. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed in a tuxedo, shaking a wet umbrella. He had a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, the smile of a shark in calm waters. "Harrison!" Preston boomed, his voice echoing in the large room. "Arthur told me you were sick. I was worried. The gala is in shambles without you, old friend." Preston took 3 steps into the room before he saw Jamie sitting on the couch. He stopped. The smile didn't vanish. It just froze. It became a mask. "Jamie," Preston said, his voice dropping an octave. "My goodness, it's been a long time. You're looking, well." Harrison watched Preston carefully. He saw the micro-expression of panic flit across his friend's face. "She was on the street, Preston," Harrison said, his voice dangerously calm. "In the rain. With my daughter." Preston raised an eyebrow. "Your daughter?" "Harrison, are we sure about that? Remember the circumstances." "I remember what you told me," Harrison said, stepping closer to Preston. "I remember you handling the DNA test. I remember you handling the settlement." "I did what I had to do to protect you," Preston said, smoothing his lapels. "She was a liability." "I never got the money, Preston," Jamie said, standing up. She looked small next to the 2 men, but her voice was steady. Preston chuckled, a dismissive sound. "Oh, Jamie, still playing the victim? I have the wire transfer receipt in my office." "Good," Harrison said. "Then you won't mind if we go there right now. Tonight." Preston's eyes darted to the elevator. "Tonight? Harrison, be reasonable. It's late. You're clearly emotional. Let's discuss this in the morning with the legal team." "No," Harrison said. "We do it now." Preston sighed. He reached into his tuxedo jacket pocket. For a split second, Harrison thought he was reaching for a phone. But Preston didn't pull out a phone. He pulled out a small, silver pistol. Jamie screamed. "I really didn't want it to end this way, Harrison," Preston said, pointing the gun at Harrison's chest. "I really didn't. I built this empire with you. I deserved half. But you always had to be the king." "Put the gun down, Preston," Harrison said, holding his hands up. "There are cameras here." "I looped the security feed before I came up," Preston smiled. "Cybersecurity 101, old friend. It'll look like a domestic dispute. Distraught ex-wife returns, shoots billionaire husband, then turns gun on herself. Tragic. You won't get away with it, Jamie cried. I've gotten away with it for 5 years, Preston sneered. He cocked the hammer. Say goodbye, Harrison. The barrel of the silver pistol was steady. Preston Calloway's hand didn't shake. That was the terrifying part, the absolute calm of a man who had already justified murder in his own mind. You're insane, Preston, Harrison said, his voice level, though his pulse was deafening in his ears. You're a corporate lawyer, not a hitman. You pull that trigger, and the ballistics alone will match a gun registered to a burglar who died 3 years ago, Preston cut in smoothly. I'm thorough, Harrison. You know that. That's why you hired me. Jamie stood frozen near the couch. She wasn't looking at the gun. She was looking at the hallway leading to the guest room where Lily was sleeping. She calculated the distance. If she ran, could she lock the door before Preston shot her? Unlikely. Get on your knees, Preston commanded, gesturing with the gun. Both of you, hands behind your heads. Harrison slowly lowered himself to the cold marble floor. He caught Jamie's eye. Trust me, he mouthed. Jamie hesitated, then knelt beside him. She was trembling, her breath coming in short, panicked hitches. Harrison shifted his weight, moving slightly in front of her. Noble, Preston sneered, but useless. Why, Preston? Harrison asked, stalling. He needed time. He needed a miracle. The money wasn't enough. You had to destroy my family, too? Your family? Preston laughed, a sharp bark of sound. You didn't have a family, Harrison. You had a merger. You treated Jamie like an asset. I just liquidated her. He took a step closer. And honestly, it was easy. You were so ready to believe the worst of her. That's your flaw. You think everyone is as transactional as you are. Harrison felt the sting of truth. It hurt more than the cold floor. I was wrong, he said quietly. Too late for epiphanies, Preston said. He raised the gun to Harrison's forehead. Any last words, Mr. Sterling? Harrison looked past Preston, towards the darkened foyer. He saw a shadow move. Yeah, Harrison said, his eyes locking onto Preston's. I have 2 words. Preston frowned. Well? Arthur. Now. Preston flinched, confused. What? Behind Preston, the shadows detached themselves from the wall. Arthur, the stoic driver, had not stayed in the car. He had used the service elevator, standard protocol when the boss was distressed. He moved with the silent, terrifying speed of the recon marine he used to be. Before Preston could turn, a heavy ceramic vase from the hallway console table smashed into the back of his hand. Crack! Preston screamed, the gun flying from his shattered grip and skittering across the marble floor. Arthur! Harrison roared, lunging forward. But Arthur was already there. He wrapped a massive arm around Preston's neck, putting him in a sleeper hold. Preston thrashed, kicking wildly, his tuxedo tearing. But he was a lawyer fighting a soldier. It was over in seconds. Preston slumped unconscious. Arthur dropped him like a sack of laundry, then immediately kicked the gun away towards the wall. Secure, Arthur said, adjusting his tie as if he had just dusted a shelf. Police are already en route, sir. I called them from the car when I saw Mr. Calloway enter the building. He wasn't on the guest list. Harrison scrambled up and grabbed Jamie, pulling her into a fierce embrace. She collapsed against him, sobbing into his wet shirt. It's okay, Harrison whispered, burying his face in her hair. It's over, I've got you. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a shaking rage. Harrison looked down at the unconscious form of his best friend. He wanted to kill him. He wanted to finish what Arthur started. But then a small, sleepy voice cut through the violence. Mummy? Harrison and Jamie froze. They turned to see Lily standing in the hallway entrance, rubbing her eyes. She was clutching the cashmere blanket, looking tiny and confused. Why is that man sleeping on the floor? She asked. Jamie broke away from Harrison and ran to her daughter, scooping her up and turning her face away from the scene. It's a game, baby. Just a silly game. Let's go back to bed. Harrison watched them go. He looked at Arthur. "Keep him down," Harrison ordered, his voice ice cold. "If he wakes up, put him back to sleep." "With pleasure, sir," Arthur replied. The next 3 hours were a blur of blue lights and legal statements. The Chicago PD took Preston away in handcuffs. He was conscious by then, shouting threats about suing the department, suing Harrison, suing everyone. But Harrison had already handed over the tablet with the financial data Arthur had helped him secure. Preston Calloway wasn't going to court. He was going to prison for a very long time. By 3 a.m., the penthouse was quiet again. The police were gone. The staff had cleaned up the broken vase. Harrison sat at his kitchen island, staring at a cup of black coffee. He felt hollowed out. He had his fortune. He had his vindication. But as he looked around the empty luxury of his home, he felt like the poorest man on earth. Jamie walked into the kitchen. She had finally showered and changed into some clean clothes, Mrs. Higgins had found a pair of sweatpants and a sweater that were too big, but warm. "Is she asleep?" Harrison asked gently. "Finally," Jamie said. She didn't sit. She stood by the counter, arms crossed. "We need to talk about what happens tomorrow." "You're staying here," Harrison said immediately. "I'll move to a hotel if you want. But this is the safest place for you and Lily. I've already hired private security." "Harrison, we can't just play house because you feel guilty," Jamie said, her voice tired. "We have a life. It's a hard life, but it's ours." "A life in a shelter?" Harrison challenged, though not unkindly. "Jamie, you have nothing. Preston stole it. I can give it back." "I don't want your money," Jamie snapped. "I want my reputation back. I want to be able to get a job without people thinking I'm a thief. I'll fix that. I'll issue a press release. Mummy!" The scream came from the guest room. It wasn't a sleepy cry. It was a shriek of pure pain. Jamie dropped her coffee mug. It shattered on the floor, but she was already running. Harrison was right on her heels. They burst into the guest room. Lily was thrashing in the bed, her back arched, her tiny hands clutching at her chest. Her skin, which had been pale before, was now a terrifying shade of grey. She was gasping for air, her lips turning purple. "Lily! Lily, look at Mummy!" Jamie cried, grabbing the girl's shoulders. "It hurts!" Lily wheezed. "My heart! It hurts!" Harrison froze. "What's happening? Is it a panic attack?" Jamie turned to him, her face white with terror. "No, call 911, now!" Harrison fumbled for his phone, dialing with trembling fingers. "What is it, Jamie?" "She has hypoplastic left heart syndrome," Jamie screamed, tears streaming down her face as she tried to calm the convulsing child. "She's been on the waiting list for a valve repair for 2 years. We lost our insurance when I left." Harrison felt the world tilt on its axis. "Heart condition. Tell them we need a cardiac ambulance," Jamie yelled. Harrison shouted the orders into the phone. He dropped the device and moved to the bed. Lily's eyes were rolling back. She was fading. "Stay with us, Lily," Harrison pleaded, grabbing her tiny, cold hand. It felt fragile, like a bird's wing. "Daddy's here. Daddy's got you." Lily's eyes fluttered. She looked at him, really looked at him, through the haze of pain. "Daddy?" she whispered. It was the first time she had said it. It hit Harrison like a physical blow. "Yeah, sweetheart, I'm here." "Don't let the rain get me," she mumbled, her voice slurring. "Never," Harrison vowed, tears spilling onto his cheeks. "I will never let the rain touch you again." The wait at Northwestern Memorial Hospital was agonizing. Harrison Sterling could buy the building, but he couldn't buy speed in the operating room. He paced the private waiting room, a caged animal. Jamie sat in a chair, staring at the wall, rocking back and forth. Dr. Aris Thorne, the chief of pediatric cardiology, finally entered. He looked grave. Harrison stopped pacing. "Doctor?" "She's stable," Dr. Thorne said. Jamie let out a sob of relief. "But," the doctor raised a hand, "her heart is failing. The hyperplasia has advanced faster than we expected, likely exacerbated by the malnutrition and the stress of the hypothermia." "Fix it," Harrison said. Whatever it costs. I'll write the check right now." Dr. Thorne sighed, taking off his glasses. "Mr. Sterling, it's not about money. It's about anatomy. Her heart is too weak for the standard reconstruction. She needs a transplant, and she needs it soon." "How soon?" Jamie whispered. "Weeks. Maybe a month," Dr. Thorne said. "But here's the problem. Because you have no fixed address and no steady income history for the last 5 years," he looked gently at Jamie. She was moved to the bottom of the national recipient list. "The protocols are strict. They don't give hearts to patients who might not have the environment to support the recovery." Jamie buried her face in her hands. The poverty Preston had forced her into was now actively killing her daughter. Harrison stepped forward. "She has a fixed address. She lives at the Sterling penthouse. She has the best care money can buy. She is my daughter." "I need that legally documented," Dr. Thorne said. "And even then, the list is long." Harrison's eyes hardened. "I know the board of directors of this hospital. I donated the new wing." "That helps with getting a room, Mr. Sterling, but it doesn't print a heart," Dr. Thorne said sternly. "However, there is a new experimental procedure, a mechanical assist device that could buy her time until a heart is found, but it requires the parents to be 100% compatible for blood transfusions during the surgery because her antibodies are through the roof. We need to test you both immediately." "Test me," Harrison said, rolling up his sleeve. An hour later, a nurse came back with the results. She looked confused. She held a clipboard, looking from Harrison to Jamie. "Is there a problem?" Harrison asked. "Mr. Sterling," the nurse said, "your blood type is a negative. Jamie's is O positive." "So?" "Lily is B positive," the nurse said. Harrison frowned. Biology 101. A negative and O positive parents couldn't produce a B positive child. The room went silent. The air was suddenly sucked out of the space. Harrison turned slowly to look at Jamie. Jamie wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the floor, tears silently falling. She didn't look surprised. She looked resigned. "Jamie," Harrison said, his voice trembling. "What does that mean?" "She's yours, Harrison," Jamie whispered, "in every way that matters. But she's not your biological daughter." "You lied?" Harrison felt a flare of betrayal. Preston was right. "You did cheat?" "No." Jamie stood up, her eyes fierce. "I never cheated. I told you I was pregnant because I was pregnant. But I lost the baby, Harrison." She took a step toward him, her hands imploring. "I lost our baby the night you kicked me out. The stress, the rain. I miscarried in the motel room." Harrison felt like he had been punched in the gut. "Then, who is Lily?" 2 months later, Jamie cried, "I was volunteering at the shelter. A woman came in, a junkie. She had a baby. She left the baby in a basket in the bathroom and vanished. That was Lily." Jamie grabbed Harrison's lapels. "I couldn't save our baby, Harrison. But I could save her. I adopted her. I raised her. I told her about her daddy, who was a great man, because I wanted her to feel loved. I named her Lily because that was the name we picked out." Harrison stared at her. The complexity of the lie, the depth of the grief. Jamie had replaced the child she lost with a child who needed her, and she had loved that child with a ferocity that defied biology. "She needs a father, Harrison," Jamie sobbed. "She thinks you're her father. If you tell her the truth now, if you walk away, her heart will stop. I swear it." Harrison looked through the glass window into the ICU room. He saw Lily, hooked up to tubes and wires. She looked so small. She had his mother's auburn hair, but that was just a coincidence, a trick of fate. She wasn't his blood. She wasn't his DNA. She was just a stranger's child that his ex-wife had saved. Harrison looked at his reflection in the glass. He saw a billionaire, a man of logic, a man who didn't invest in bad assets. But then he remembered the way her tiny hand had held his. "Daddy's got you." He turned back to the nurse. "My blood isn't a match," Harrison said, his voice firm. "But my wallet is. Find a donor. Fly them in from anywhere in the world. I don't care if it costs $50 million. You save my daughter. He looked at Jamie, whose knees buckled with relief. He caught her. We have a lot to talk about, Harrison whispered to her. But for now, we are her parents. Both of us. The story of Harrison Sterling finding his destitute ex-wife and dying daughter broke the internet before the sun even rose over Lake Michigan. By 8 a.m., the entrance to Northwestern Memorial Hospital was a barricade of satellite trucks and paparazzi. The headline on the Chicago Tribune read, "The Billionaire's Secret, Sterling Heir Found in Homeless Shelter." Harrison didn't care about the cameras. He didn't care about the plummeting stock price of Sterling Vance Logistics, or the frantic calls from his board of directors threatening a vote of no confidence. He had turned the VIP waiting room on the cardiac floor into a war room. But this war wasn't about market shares. It was about biology and logistics. "We have a potential match in Boston," Arthur said, entering the room with a tablet. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened. "Type B positive, pediatric donor, tragically a car accident." Harrison looked up from the piles of medical journals he had been manic reading. "Get the jet ready." "We can't," Arthur said grimly. "Boston is grounded. Nor'easter. No flights in or out for the next 6 hours." Harrison slammed his fist onto the table. 6 hours is too long. Lily's pressure is dropping. Dr. Thorne said we have a window of maybe 48 hours before her kidneys shut down. Jamie was sitting in the corner by the window. She hadn't left the room in 2 days. She looked frail, her skin pale, but her eyes were fixed on the door to the ICU. "Money can't control the weather, Harrison," she said softly. "I don't accept that," Harrison snapped, grabbing his phone. He dialed the number of the chief of operations at Sterling Vance. "Get me a chopper. Military grade. I don't care if you have to bribe the National Guard. If there is a heart in Boston, I want it in Chicago by noon." While Harrison fought the elements, another storm was brewing, one orchestrated from a jail cell. Preston Calloway had been denied bail, given the flight risk and the mountain of financial evidence Arthur had uncovered. But Preston still had one weapon left, a slimy defense attorney named Gavin Rourke, and a vendetta. At 10 a.m., Gavin Rourke gave a press conference on the courthouse steps. "My client is being framed by a man desperate to clean up his own messy personal life," Rourke announced to the microphones. "Harrison Sterling is playing the hero, pretending to save his daughter. But we have evidence that the child, Lily, is not a Sterling. She is a random orphan, picked up by his mentally unstable ex-wife. Harrison is defrauding the hospital transplant list by claiming paternity to skip the line." The news hit the hospital waiting room like a grenade. Harrison saw it on the TV mounted on the wall. He watched the ticker tape. "Sterling daughter a fraud?" Jamie let out a small, wounded sound. "He told," she whispered. Preston knew about the miscarriage. He guessed the rest. Harrison grabbed the remote and turned the TV off. He walked over to Jamie and knelt in front of her. "It doesn't matter what they say." "It does matter," Jamie cried, standing up. "The hospital ethics board is meeting right now, Harrison. If they think we are lying to manipulate the UNOS list, they will kick Lily off. She'll die because of a technicality." As if on cue, Dr. Thorne entered the room. He didn't look happy. He was accompanied by a woman in a severe grey suit, Ms. Kincaid, the head of hospital legal. "Mr. Sterling," Miss Kincaid began, her voice crisp, "in light of recent allegations regarding the paternity of the patient." Harrison stood up to his full height. He was unshaven, wearing the same clothes for 2 days, but he radiated a terrifying power. "Stop," Harrison said. "Sir, we need to verify." I said stop. Harrison walked over to the desk where he had been working. He picked up a document he had had his lawyers draft overnight. He slapped it onto the table. "This," Harrison pointed, "is an adoption decree. Expedited by a judge I played golf with for 10 years. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Lily is legally my daughter. Not biologically, legally. My name is on the certificate. My insurance covers her. My assets are hers," he turned to Miss Kincaid. "So if you want to talk about technicalities, here is the paperwork." Now get out of my way and let Dr. Thorne do his job." Miss Kincaid picked up the paper, reviewed it, and nodded slowly. "This appears to be an order. The relationship is legal." She left. Dr. Thorne looked at Harrison with a newfound respect. "You move fast, Harrison." "I missed 5 years," Harrison said, his voice cracking slightly. "I'm catching up." Just then, Arthur burst back into the room. "Sir, the Boston Halt. It's a no-go. The weather is too severe. The donor team can't harvest." Jamie collapsed back into the chair, burying her face in her hands. "But," Arthur continued, breathless, "we have another ping. A match just came up. Closer." "Where?" "St. Louis," Arthur said. "But there's a problem. It's a high-risk transport. The donor is in a rural hospital, no helipad, and the roads are icing over." Harrison looked at Jamie. He looked at the closed door of the ICU, where a little girl named Lily was fighting for every breath. "I'm driving," Harrison said. "Sir?" Arthur blinked. "I started as a driver for this company, Arthur. I know the routes better than anyone. Get the specialized ambulance. You and I are going to St. Louis. We're bringing that heart back ourselves." "It's a suicide run in this weather," Arthur warned. "Then it's a good day to die," Harrison said, buttoning his jacket. He turned to Jamie. "Stay with her. Talk to her. Tell her Daddy is coming." Harrison kissed Jamie on the forehead, a lingering, desperate kiss, and ran out the door. The journey from St. Louis to Chicago was not just a drive. It was a war against the elements. The Mercedes Sprinter ambulance, a high-roofed fortress of medical engineering, shuddered violently as a gust of wind slammed into its side. Outside, the world had been reduced to a hostile blur of white and grey. The blizzard that had grounded the jets in Boston had swung west with a vengeance, turning Interstate 55 into a treacherous gauntlet of black ice and blinding snow. Harrison Sterling gripped the leather-wrapped steering wheel until his knuckles turned the color of bone. He was doing 90 miles an hour on a stretch of highway where 50 would have been reckless. Every muscle in his body was coiled tight, his eyes burning from the strain of piercing the darkness. In the passenger seat, Arthur, usually the picture of stoic calm, was bracing himself against the dashboard, his eyes darting between the GPS and the speedometer. "We're losing traction on the curves, sir," Arthur warned, his voice tight. "The rear axle is drifting." "I know," Harrison gritted out, correcting a slide with a micro-adjustment of the wheel. "But we have 90 minutes of viability left on the organ. If I slow down, that heart dies in the box. If the heart dies, Lily dies." In the back of the ambulance, the transport medic, a young man named Davis, was strapped into his seat, his hands protective over the red cooler secured to the gurney. Inside that cooler sat the most precious cargo on the planet, a pediatric heart, packed in ice and preservation fluid, ticking down its shelf life with every passing mile marker. Harrison's mind flashed back to the years he had spent building his logistics empire. He had moved fleets of trucks, cargo ships, and planes across the globe. He had obsessively tracked delivery times for microchips and steel, but none of that mattered now. All his billions, all his logistical genius had boiled down to this: one man, one van, and a singular, desperate need to outrun death. "Police blockade ahead!" Arthur's shout shattered Harrison's focus. Harrison squinted through the windshield. Half a mile down the road, a constellation of red and blue lights pulsed in the snowy haze. The state police had shut down the highway. 3 cruisers were parked horizontally across the lanes, flares sputtering on the asphalt. They must have closed the corridor due to the ice, Arthur realized, reaching for the CB radio. "This is Sterling Transport 1 to State Patrol. We are a medical emergency transport carrying a code red organ for transplant. We require immediate passage. I repeat, immediate passage." Static crackled back. "Negative, Transport 1. The bridge ahead is iced over. Too dangerous. You need to reroute to Highway 4. "Rerouting adds 40 minutes, Harrison roared. Not at the radio, but at the universe. "We don't have 40 minutes. He didn't take his foot off the gas. The speedometer climbed. 95, 98, 100. Sir? Arthur looked at him, realizing the plan before Harrison spoke it. Harrison, don't. Call it in, Arthur, Harrison commanded, his voice eerily calm. Tell them we aren't stopping. Arthur grabbed the mic again, his voice dropping an octave. State Patrol, be advised, we are not stopping. Clear the lane, or we will clear it for you. The gap between two of the patrol cars was narrow, barely enough for a sedan, let alone a reinforced ambulance. Harrison tightened his grip. He didn't look at the flashing lights. He looked at the darkness beyond them. He thought of Lily's small hand in his. He thought of Jamie's tears. Not tonight, he thought. The rain doesn't win tonight. Harrison floored it. The engine screamed a mechanical war cry. The officers at the blockade scrambled, realizing too late that the oncoming headlights weren't slowing down. They dove towards the median. Harrison threaded the needle. Crunch! The ambulance clipped the side mirror of the left patrol car. Metal shrieked against metal, sparks showering the icy road like fireworks. The heavy vehicle fishtailed violently, threatening to spin out into the ditch. Harrison fought the wheel, his forearms straining, using every ounce of his driving experience to correct the skid. The tires bit into the asphalt. The ambulance straightened. They were through. Behind them, the night erupted in sirens as the patrol cars peeled out in pursuit. "We have a police escort now!" Harrison yelled, a wild, manic laugh escaping his throat. Tears were streaming down his face, born of terror and adrenaline. "Let them chase us! Let them clear the road!" They tore through the remaining miles, a convoy of desperation illuminated by the flashing lights in their rearview mirror. When the skyline of Chicago finally appeared, glowing amber through the falling snow, Harrison felt his heart stutter. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. They screeched into the ambulance bay of Northwestern Memorial Hospital at 9:48 p.m., 12 minutes before the organ would have been deemed non-viable. Dr. Thorne was waiting on the heated ramp with a team of scrubs. Before the ambulance even came to a full halt, the back doors flew open. Davis handed the red cooler to a runner, and the medical team sprinted towards the elevators like a pit crew. Harrison killed the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. He slumped over the steering wheel, his body shaking so violently his teeth chattered. Arthur unbuckled his seatbelt and reached over, placing a heavy hand on Harrison's shoulder. "You did it, boss," Arthur whispered. "You delivered." The next 6 hours were an agony of a different kind. The adrenaline had crashed, leaving Harrison and Jamie in the quiet, sterile purgatory of the surgical waiting room. The hospital was hushed, the only sounds the hum of the vending machine and the distant squeak of nurses' shoes. Harrison and Jamie sat side by side on the uncomfortable vinyl chairs. They didn't speak much. There were no words left. Harrison held Jamie's hand, rubbing his thumb over her knuckles, grounding himself. Around 2 a.m., Jamie broke the silence. "You really drove through a police blockade?" she asked softly, not looking at him. "I would have driven through a brick wall," Harrison replied. Jamie turned to him. Her eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted, but clear. "Harrison, why?" You know, she isn't." "Don't," Harrison cut her off gently. "Don't say she isn't mine. Biology is just chemistry. Being a father, that's a promise, and I made a promise." Jamie squeezed his hand, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. About the baby. About everything. We both have a lot to forgive," Harrison whispered, kissing the top of her head. "But we have time now. I hope." At 4 a.m., the double doors at the end of the hallway swung open. Dr. Thorne walked out. He looked wrecked. His surgical cap was crooked, and sweat had soaked through the neck of his scrubs. He walked slowly towards them, his face unreadable. Harrison and Jamie stood up, their hearts hammering against their ribs. Dr. Thorne stopped in front of them. He took a deep breath, pulled down his mask, and smiled. "It's beating," he said. "The transplant was a success. She's going to make it." Jamie let out a guttural scream of relief, her legs giving way. Harrison caught her, pulling her into a fierce embrace. He buried his face in her neck, and for the first time since he was a child, Harrison Sterling wept. He cried for the years he lost, for the pain he caused, and for the second chance he didn't deserve, but had fought to earn. 1 year later. Autumn in Chicago had a way of turning the city into a painting. The air was crisp, smelling of wood smoke and Lake Michigan, and the leaves in Lincoln Park had exploded into vibrant shades of gold and crimson. Harrison Sterling sat on a park bench, a wool coat buttoned against the chill. He wasn't checking stocks on his phone. He wasn't on a conference call. He was watching a miracle. Lily, now 6 years old and filling out with the healthy vitality of childhood, was sprinting across the grass, chasing a golden retriever puppy. Her cheeks were flushed pink, her laughter ringing out clear and strong. She stopped running, panting happily, and placed her hand dramatically over her chest. "Daddy, look!" she shouted, pointing to her chest. "Look how fast my new heart is." "I see it, baby," Harrison called back, grinning. "It's a racing heart, the fastest one in the park." Jamie sat next to him, sipping a hot latte. She looked radiant. The hollow exhaustion of the homeless shelter was a distant memory. She wore a simple cream sweater and jeans, her hair loose and shining. She was finishing her master's degree in social work, using the Sterling Foundation to fund housing initiatives for single mothers. "She looks like you," Jamie said, watching Lily tumble into a pile of leaves. "She looks like us," Harrison corrected. "She has your fire, and my stubbornness." He reached into his pocket, his fingers brushing against the velvet box he had been carrying for 3 months. He had practiced this moment 1,000 times in the mirror, but now that it was here, his throat felt tight. "Jamie," he began, his voice dropping. Jamie turned to look at him. She saw the intensity in his eyes, the same intensity he used to reserve for boardrooms, now directed entirely at her. She knew. Harrison slid off the bench, getting down on one knee in the crunching leaves. "We did this all backward," Harrison said, opening the box. Inside sat a ring unlike any other. It wasn't a massive diamond. It was a sapphire, deep and blue, like the rain on the night they found each other again, surrounded by a halo of white gold. "We started with the money," Harrison said softly. "Then we had the pain. Then we had the child. I want to start over. I want to do the part where I promise to love you for the rest of my life, not because of a contract, but because I can't breathe without you." He looked up at her, his eyes shining. "Jamie, will you marry me? For real this time. No prenups, no lawyers. Just us." Jamie looked at the ring, then at Harrison, and finally over at Lily, who had stopped playing to watch them with a wide, toothy grin. Jamie leaned down, cupping Harrison's face in her hands. "Ask me again," she whispered, a playful spark in her teary eyes. "I like hearing the great Harrison Sterling beg." Harrison laughed, a free, joyous sound. "Jamie, love of my life. Will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered, pulling him up to kiss him. "Yes, 1,000 times. Yeah." As they embraced, the wind picked up, shaking the trees. A few stray drops of rain began to fall from the grey autumn sky. Harrison looked up. He didn't flinch. He didn't run for cover. He just wrapped his arms tighter around his family, pulling Lily into the hug as she ran over. The rain was falling, but for the first time in a long time, Harrison Sterling wasn't cold. He was home. And that is the story of Harrison Sterling, a man who had millions in the bank, but was spiritually bankrupt until he found the only treasure that really mattered on a rainy street corner. It's a reminder that sometimes the worst storms in our lives are just clearing the path for a beautiful new beginning. Harrison thought he was saving Lily, but in the end, Lily and Jamie saved him. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more emotional dramas like this one. What would you have done in Harrison's shoes? Would you have forgiven the past to save the child? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.